Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star Sports podcast presented by Underdog. I'm Blair Kirchhoff. The back and forth between Missouri and Kansas when it comes to future homes of the Chiefs and Royals heated up recently with a letter from Chiefs President Mark Donovan to the Kansas Senate requesting the state extend its deadline to use Star Bonds incentives for stadium projects. Here's a line from the letter from Donovan, quote, "Together we have the opportunity to bring the National Football League to Kansas, anchored by a world-class dome stadium, a new team headquarters, a state-of-the-art practice facility, and a vibrant mixed-use and entertainment district." End of quote. This letter was sent shortly after Missouri passed the Show Me Sports Investment Act, which is basically Missouri's offer to keep the Chiefs and Royals on its side of the state line. On this show, a group of Star veteran sports reporters, Sam McDowell, Vahe Gregorian, and Jesse Newell, broke down the latest developments in what's now being described as the latest installment of the border war, this time as it relates to housing Kansas City's pro sports teams. Sam McDowell leads off our discussion.
First of all, this has developed into a very clear-cut border war for these teams, to where these teams are in better position after the voters rejecting them than they were before the voters rejected them, which was foreseeable. I mean, it was foreseeable that Kansas was going to get involved. Kansas City is in not an entirely unique, but at least like an atypical situation for NFL teams, not having to move markets, but still being able to get different legislative bodies to compete against one another. So the Chiefs' letter illustrates what's true, which is they're at the forefront of this, of trying to get Kansas to extend the Star Bonds deadline, which they will meet a week from when we're podcasting here to officially likely approve that. But, yeah, I mean, you've got these two teams going back and forth, putting just like trying to one up, or two states trying to one up one another. And it speaks to really the brilliance, I think, of the way the Chiefs have played this. And that's why I say the Chiefs, I mean, they've sent the letter. Like, I know for a fact they've been at the forefront of this. And, I mean, they're getting the best financial offers they possibly can. And even if they do want to stay in Missouri, this can't hurt their chances of getting the best offer they can in Missouri. But sorry to sort of evade the top of the line question is where do I think? I mean, I think Kansas is in play for both teams. I think more so for the Royals, I would say, but I think it's in play for both teams.
I actually want to ask you this, Sam, and of course you guys overall, but some of the language in the letter is what I found a little, I don't know, both sort of jarring and compelling about how strongly Mark Donovan seemed to be saying some of these things. And if you didn't know, this was still part of a negotiation, you'd be like, it sounds like they're in, right? I mean, foundation for something historic. We've worked closely with the administration to bring this vision to life, fully committed to this opportunity, all these things. The language is so strong. I almost found myself thinking, is this some just form of three-dimensional chess? I mean, wanting to make sure it's enhancing the leverage, or is it, to be taken at face value that way?
Well, I think everybody involved in this has had to ask themselves at some point, are we being used for leverage? That's Kansas, that's Missouri, that's Jackson County, that for the Royals was Clay County on multiple occasions. I mean, everyone has had to ask themselves, am I just being used for leverage? And so that's why I think the letter had to be as strong as it was from Mark Donovan. And this is obviously a coordinated effort. These letters came out in conjunction with one another, but I think basically he feels like in order to get this extended, he has to say, we are serious about this option. And I do think they're serious about that option. Now, I think one of the reasons you have to be serious about it is you still don't know what you're going to get from Jackson County. And in order to have that, that show me, I can't ever remember the exact
Sports
name.
Investment Act.
Whatever it's called. You have to have a local entity also provide funding. And we don't know what that's going to be in Missouri. And the reason I said that I think the Royals are more likely to look at Kansas is because if you have to secure local funding, I can't figure out exactly what that would be for the Royals. I don't know that they can feel confident that they would get any tax passed, especially on their own. Like, they don't have the Chiefs holding their hands this time. I shouldn't say holding their hands, but I'm saying they don't have that boost from just Chiefs fans the Patrick Mahomes boost that you would like. The
vote failed earlier with the Chiefs.
Yeah, exactly.
So how is it going to pass only with the Royals?
And I just find that difficult. I can't figure out the exact path that they should feel confident going to the polls in. The Chiefs, I think, can. If they get it on the ballot, if they get the proper support from Jackson County. But those things are still up in the air right now, which is why they're certainly, at the very least, leaving their options open in Kansas, and that's probably pretty generous.
Sam, can we back up just a minute for people who are kind of joining this late? And I know there's been lots of stadium stuff out there, but when we're talking about Kansas versus Missouri for the Chiefs, Missouri, we're talking about renovated Arrowhead, correct?
Yeah, the only option.
The price tag would be about $1.1 billion was the last estimation on that.
Yeah.
And you'd be talking about staying there, kind of making it historic, if you will. It would become like a new Lambeau Field sort of thing, but it becomes Chicago's as well. Soldier Field kind of becomes the old guard of the NFL and more of that sort of thing. We've heard Clark Hunt, the Chiefs owner, before say that his father's favorite place on earth was Arrowhead Stadium, so there's some sentimental value there. But to do that, Missouri, with that new law that they passed, would help them out, but the Chiefs would still need more funding from, as you're talking about, Jackson County, some of the local people there. When we're talking about Kansas, we're talking about a $3 billion price tag. We're talking about a dome because they would want to host a Super Bowl. They would want more events there. We talked to Mark Donovan, Chiefs team president, at the winter meetings or the NFL annual meetings, and he said that he's very confident that if they got that dome in Kansas, that they would host a Super Bowl at some point, potentially Final Fours, other things as well. So kind of the two things that make these projects unique is dome or not dome, history or brand new, and then also the funding you'll have to secure, because as you said, Sam, the Kansas funding is already there. It's in the bonds. Missouri, you still have to come into the taxpayers and some of these local entities and say, we need to kind of make up for the rest of this cost.
Yeah, that's all accurate. I do think that both of these projects, even as I think the teams are in great position, they're more complicated than I think they look on paper, for example. I mean, with Missouri, it's for that reason. Like, you have to get Jackson County, or if the Royals, potentially Clay County, but, you've got to get some other entity to, put some money on the table. And that's likely going to be a vote. Not necessarily with the Royals, but likely going to be a vote. And Kansas, you still have to sell the bonds. And so from my understanding, in Kansas, you can pay up to 70% of a stadium with this star bond legislation. But from my understanding, even the teams, at least the Chiefs, are not operating under the fact that they would get 70%, because it's not realistic to be able to sell $2 billion in bonds. So with that, you compared the Chiefs last time, the renovation proposal, we're going to put forth $300 million. I think now you'd probably be talking closer to $4 billion. But even if it's $400 million in Kansas, I can't see a way where the Chiefs are paying less than at least $1 billion, and very, very likely more than $1 billion towards that. So total project cost is different. We've been around the Chiefs a long time. We all think it's important that the ownership cost is different in those two projects as well.
Yeah, and the financial commitment there is just so. Again, we can't talk about Clark Hunt and what exactly he wants from this. Again, the nostalgia probably leans him back towards Arrowhead, but you also think of his long-term, I don't know, what I want to use, legacy, standing. I mean, if he brought a Super Bowl to Kansas City, to Kansas, that becomes part of who he is as an owner and what he did and maybe how he pushed forward, like his father did the Super Bowl. He brought that to this area and would be known for that. So again, I can't tell people how to spend their money or what to do with it. But it does, I think these dividing line is so fascinating, Sam, as you pointed out, just because whether the Chiefs stay in Missouri or they go to Kansas, it will define how we view Clark Hunt in 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years from now, because this is going to be a major pillar of the legacy he leaves with the Chiefs and the NFL and with the Kansas City area as a whole.
I think there's something to that we haven't considered strongly while we're discussing all this, and that is with the success that the Chiefs are having now and the generational talent they have in Patrick Mahomes, this is the opportunity to create something that is bigger and bolder than maybe anything that the Hunts would have considered. That this is their this is their opportunity to build a SoFi type stadium, to build the multi-billion-dollar structure that has all the bells and whistles that maybe if the Chiefs were continuing on in a way that the Chiefs had historically without, 5 Super Bowls in 6 years and a player like Patrick Mahomes, they wouldn't have been able to consider. But this really does give them a chance to, build the house that, Patrick Mahomes built, or, construct the home that Patrick Mahomes built, that sort of thing. And maybe that's in the back of the minds of the Hunts. It's something that I hadn't thought about until recently, and I'm glad you mentioned it, Jesse, that yes, they have talked about renovating Arrowhead, and especially without Kauffman Stadium, you can do more with the parking lot, and create what you want to create at Truman Sports Complex. But that's just a continuation of what they're already doing and what they've already had. After reading the letter and this this latest piece of news from the Chiefs, I just get a sense that maybe they're really serious about going big and going bold.
You're making me think of this from the context you just set up, right? We're in the era of talking about, where they're talking about being the world's team, right? Where they're marketing themselves everywhere that they possibly can for international games. They obviously understand that they've got to wring everything they can out of the Patrick Mahomes era. I mean, in the form of Super Bowls first and foremost. But you reminded me of something else too. I mean, we know that the Chiefs have been enamored of what they see in Las Vegas and SoFi. I hadn't thought about it this way before, but those are 2 of the 3 stadiums they see every year. Go ahead.
I was going to say Clark Hunt and Mark Donovan visit those stadiums every year.
Yeah,
and they've told us how impressed they were by those stadiums. And something else I think is worth considering. Mark Donovan has said this, that they want Kansas City to be the flag football capital of the world. And that means putting additional fields somewhere. I don't know if it's at a practice facility or if it's around the stadium, but making Kansas City something of a flag football headquarters. I think you can do that. Maybe there's more impact with a new stadium for that than there would be a renovated Arrowhead.
Guys, and we get the benefit of this to go to like SoFi and Allegiant. I mean, this reminds me of the airport conversation where nobody thought we needed a new airport, and then you get the new airport and you're like, this is really nice. Like SoFi, to me, the first time I went there, I thought, how many Super Bowls does this place get because it needs more? Like, this place is unbelievable. To have a place like that in Kansas would be unbelievable, and people don't realize how nice it would be until you would actually go there, and potentially the next Taylor Swift concert that gets taped and made into a movie, it's at the stadium in Kansas instead of SoFi or whatever. But Sam, to bring this back, listen, if a SoFi-like stadium was built in Kansas, and that's where the future Chiefs' home was, and the Hunt family spent $2 billion on it, I would think a whole lot different of the ownership of the Chiefs than I currently do right now, because that is a lot of money. That is a lot of investment. And we can say they're going to make it back up. We can say the Super Bowls will help. That is a large paycheck to have to make. So I just wonder your thoughts on that, Sam. I mean, if they do go to Kansas and they do pony up $2 billion to make this sort of thing, which all of us would be a part of and take part in and see, whether it was for a concert or an event or a Super Bowl or whatever.
Final Four.
How does that change? Yeah, how does that change
championship game?
How you view Clark Hunt, the Chiefs, all of the above? Because that would take a very serious investment.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to get. Look, we know that they've done these studies even among their own fans, and they say that the study shows that people will be willing to go to a stadium within, I think it was like a 70-minute drive or something like that. But I do think you're going to have fans, regardless of the decision, upset about it. I think a new build would probably the disappointment would be more intensely felt, I think, by the people who are attached to Arrowhead Stadium. Mm-hmm. People who live in eastern Jackson County who would be driving a significantly farther drive in order to attend games than it would be for something that you've maybe never seen, never felt in that way. Let's face it, there would be a different environment here, right? They can say that they'll prioritize the tailgating. I believe them. They can say they'll prioritize the crowd noise. I believe them. But it would be a different feel. Like, SoFi has a different feel. than Arrowhead does. Allegiant has a different field than Arrowhead does. Allegiant has a different field than the Coliseum did. Remember, the Coliseum was an intimidating place.
Oh, yeah. Oakland Coliseum
for people to go into. Allegiant's just not that way. It's not. And I think but Allegiant's also probably my second favorite stadium. Of the ones
first of all, I would think Minnesota was what I would compare the new Chiefs one to. I mean, that one's still intimidating. They had other things going on, and it was a new stadium.
It's full of Vikings fans. Both L.A. and Vegas are
full of Chiefs fans. Yes,
full of the opposing team's fans. I think that's a great comparison.
But the Minnesota game, I mean, that was a home field advantage for sure when we went to that one.
Yeah. But I'll just say this: I know that the case for the new stadium is certainly being made by people who are employed by the Chiefs. I mean, I know that there's people in the Chiefs that do see what you said, Blair, most specifically, like now's the time to capitalize. And if you do renovate Arrowhead, it'll be at least a quarter century and maybe longer before, because we don't know what the lease would look like necessarily. It would be Chiefs only. But at least a quarter century, and you potentially could see like some 5-year options tacked on to where it's going to be at least a generation before you're presented with the chance to look at something new again, and you don't know that you'll have this Kansas offer when that time comes. So I do know that, and I don't know what the split is in an organization. There's a lot of people employed by that organization, a lot of higher-ups in that organization. There's multiple owners. People forget that, too. It's not just Clark Hunt. It's the whole Hunt family. And I just know that there are varying opinions, even, there might be different opinions in this room. There's different opinions in that room, too. And that's a good thing, by the way, not to have just this echo chamber of putting you into a corner why this is the best option, that you do really consider both options, which goes back to the top. That's what the Chiefs are doing. They're leaving every option they have on the table until they actually firm up what they're going to do.
Take a swing at picking sports this baseball season with Underdog. Playing on their app is as easy as choosing higher or lower on players' stats. Get them right, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. Sign up today using promo code KCSTAR to get a gimme pick as a part of your first cash entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus credits when you deposit. Must be 18 plus and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org.
One other thought, it's really also in the form of a question to you, Sam, because I think you have a really good feel for this, and maybe you guys do too. I went for a long time thinking that, the Chiefs are going to consider the Kansas opportunity, but they're going to be averse to spending that much money themselves, that was going to maybe dissuade them. They weren't going to spend $1.2 billion or $1.4 billion or whatever. They were not going to think that way financially, but that would have been short-sighted thinking on their part, for one thing. But I do wonder if you perceive an evolution in their thought process on
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Especially since, Clark Hunt's comments about this being his dad's favorite place, this holding sentimental value. It's been a minute since he's publicly volunteered that. Yeah. And I'm sure that still is true for him, but it just hasn't been, I don't think, the primary thought in this conversation anymore. I do know that he's reached a place where he's willing to move to Kansas. And I don't know that we would have said that, 2 years ago, to your point.
Yeah.
Is the only real unknown left on the table the local contribution from the Missouri side?
Yeah,
that's what we don't. We know what the Show Me Sports Investment Act will provide: 50% of funding for a stadium up to $500 million for a stadium that seats 30,000 minimum. Right? Kansas says that their Star bonds will pay for 70% of whether that's however much that's what the Star bonds say.
Yeah.
What we don't know, the big unknown factor is, will Jackson or Clay County vote for, a sales tax to extend in Jackson County or to create a new one in Clay County to help fund, which is part of the requirement of the Show Me Act, the Investment Act.
Yeah.
So to me, that's why the Chiefs, we always wonder, why can't they just make a decision? They can't make a decision until they know the outcome of that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I would say they don't have to. They could. Like, this state money's a lot.
Well,
like they could fund the rest of it if they wanted to. But you're right. That's their thinking, is we need to know this piece before. The Royals have a lot more wrinkles. We don't know the location, but even within Missouri, like the Chiefs know for sure if they use the Show Me Investment Act that they're staying at Arrowhead Stadium. It's a renovation. I've asked about building new, even at that property. That's not something that they're considering. It's like a renovated Arrowhead Stadium is the Missouri plan. But even tucked in within that Jackson County answer is, how do you get it on the ballot? It's because
when? What's the earliest it
yes.
can? I mean, November?
Yes, they can get it on in November. And there's two schools of thought there. I mean, you could get it on in November, in which case it's during football season. I think that they, in their assessment of this last vote, would have loved to have had the players in town when the vote was going on, would have loved to have had the season going on when people were voting on it, especially a Chiefs-only project. That wasn't the case when the vote was in April of 2024. But then April allows you more time. And these teams, for as much time as they had last time, it was rushed at the finish line, and that showed too. And I think that's what resonated most with voters, is we don't have all the details yet to pass this yet. You guys owe us, a more detailed and comprehensive plan. So I anticipate, April's probably more likely if that's what they do. But as far as how they get on the ballot, I mean, from my understanding, there haven't been ongoing conversations with Frank White recently, which they got it on the ballot without Frank White's support last time. You get 6 of the 9 county legislators, but I think that they could get 6 of the 9 county legislators, but
that overrides the veto.
That overrides a potential Frank White veto. But there's a lot more things in play this time. I mean, last time we saw a lot of elements of a combined lease. One of them being a community benefits agreement. That was largely because the Royals were moving into our downtown area. And I don't know what that would look like. And I know there are some people in that county that would expect one. I don't know that the Chiefs would feel like they have to give one if they're not moving, if there's no development over there, if there's very little development over there. And that's the other thing, is I think you'll see some development at Arrowhead Stadium if that's the route they choose. What does that look like? Does the county legislators approve of that? So yeah, you're totally right that that's the piece that has to get figured out. But I'm trying to explain that there's even a lot of layers tucked under that make that not so simple to figure out too.
Jesse, you're the only person here who has lived in Kansas your entire life. So my question to you is this has become an emotional, it can be an emotional topic, an issue. Sam mentioned it right off the top. It's become a little bit of a border war. Is it time for Kansas to start ponying up for the entertainment, the professional sports entertainment of this metropolitan area?
I think Kansas has been fine not doing that, right? I mean, that's how this whole thing has worked. And to Sam's point, when we talked to Mark Donovan, the Chiefs team president, about how so many people travel to Chiefs games, like they are fine traveling 100 miles, driving in 70 miles, driving 3 hours away, that it's become sort of an area team. And listen, we know how Kansas, and specifically Johnson County, has benefited from having these teams really close and yet not footing the bill for them. They're happy to hop in our Priuses and drive the 20 miles it is to get to these places, while still having the nice parks and the nice schools and all those things that are paid for with taxpayer money from another county that is not in Kansas. So I think what's so complicated about this, and I think this happens a lot, it seems like to me, especially in politics, is the people who are working very hard to get this thing in their state are the people whose legacies are going to be defined by the next few, months and years. If you are Laura Kelly and the governor who brings the Chiefs to Kansas, it's the first paragraph of your obit whenever you die. You know what I mean? It's the first paragraph of your Wikipedia page whenever you're not governor anymore. And if you are Quentin Lucas, the Kansas City mayor, and you lose the teams to Kansas, both of them, if that happened, then it's the first paragraph of your Wikipedia page. You see what I'm saying? So there are stakeholders here where it's very important for them to not lose grip, or potentially to gain grip, of these things that so many of the people in our community feel a sense of, pride toward. And so I don't think that maybe sits as much with the person that's in Kansas that easily 20 minutes can drive to Missouri and go see their favorite team and be just fine with it. But I do think there are a lot of people in the political sphere, which is why this bidding war that Sam has talked about has taken place so much, because they fully understand their legacies for all they do with whatever else is out there. It's going to be tied to the Chiefs and Royals and what happens with them here over the next year or so. And they don't want to be the person that lets the area down or lets the team out of their sights. So I think that's why you've seen so much of the infighting and so much of the bidding up, basically, is because these people understand exactly what's at stake here, even though maybe that's not what they got into politics for. They become embroiled in this whole thing pretty deep.
And Vahe, you're the only person here whose address is Kansas City, Missouri.
Who has never lived in the state of Kansas. There we go.
Yeah.
And live closest to downtown.
Yeah.
So, and asked several questions of Mayor Quentin Lucas just 2 weeks ago at a World Cup event at the Asperia campus in Overland Park, which, by the way, is a potential Royal Stadium site. But Mayor Lucas was pretty adamant about wanting to keep both teams in Jackson County. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, right? This is a generations old tradition now, right? With all this, and I think that it's not downtown per se, but I think a lot of this talk all started with John Sherman, bringing up soon after, or even as he was buying the team, talk about downtown baseball. And then we sort of heard that evolve over time about downtown or near downtown. And then, and we start hearing Kansas City area. But the initial excitement I felt about it was, I do think there's an important place in the nucleus of a region for that, especially I think a pretty vibrant downtown that could use a little more catalyst to it to really be, I think, premier. So that's not really what you asked, but I would myself prefer to see baseball come downtown for a lot of reasons, not under any condition. And there's a lot of ground to give to figure it out. But just the fact that, and Sam, I think you actually you probably live a little farther away from the stadiums than I do, but you're, on the other side of it. Okay, maybe a little closer. I mean, I don't think in our jobs we really feel, yes, of course, we like the convenience of something closer to us, but I think living near these places gives you a sense of context about what you think it means to the area. And I just think, I'm sure something would be gained by the move, but I think something will also be lost. And I think there is meaning in what it says to say Kansas City, Missouri, and what these places, what place these institutions have here. So I don't know what it looks like, when it's 2037 and we've got the Final Four here, but it's there.
I keep seeing the airport comparison. Like everybody wanted to stand in line at the crappy airports of Kansas City because you could get from curb to gate in 2 minutes, and then you get the new airport and you go, okay, I walk a little bit further, but it's sure nice to have nice restrooms, and it's sure nice to be able to grab something to eat that's decent. And so you don't know what you don't know is basically the response to it. And
that's right.
We're sort of, as humans, conditioned to go with what's familiar rather than, look to change in something we can't imagine yet. Before we wrap up, Sam, this is mostly a question for me, but I know you didn't bring your crystal ball in here in the room, but when do you figure this resolution is going to happen for both these teams? I mean, I know this extension of the lease is what they're hoping for, and they don't have to sign it right away. They don't have to sign it on June 30th, but the timeline is ticking. The 2031 it's up. I mean, you have to have years to construct a new stadium if you're going to. When do you think we will hear from these teams on what their next step is?
Well, I think my anticipation now is the Royals will come first, but I don't know any of that for certain. I could certainly see the Royals in a near future announcing something. And I think the Chiefs, I know the Chiefs are talking to reps from Jackson County. I anticipate that it'll be dictated by when they do prefer to have something on the ballot and work sort of backwards from there. But I think the Chiefs' timeline is going to be dictated on whether or not they have confidence that this is going to have the necessary legislative support in Jackson County. And because that sort of could potentially automatically answer your question if you do not. What's clear to me is that these teams don't want to encounter the same sort of roadblocks they did last time. And I think for the Royals, that's weighed really heavily in what we've seen them do since the vote. With the Chiefs, I think they're willing to sort of work through it if they see there is potentially light at the end of the tunnel there. And I think there is in Jackson County. So I guess I would be disappointed if in the next month or two we're still sitting here having this "where's this going" conversation.
And I think they still want to know what the local contribution is going to be on the Missouri side. And I think that's going to make it difficult for the Chiefs or Royals to come up with a decision before either November or, heaven forbid, next April.
Yeah, I mean, so the Royals and Chiefs, I think, are quite different in that, because the Chiefs have been pretty upfront with what they would put forth in a Missouri project. The Royals haven't been. I mean, they haven't said how much they would put forth in a project like that. And therefore, to fill that local gap in funding that you're talking about, you need to know what the team's contributing. You need to know, does it require another vote? Does it require a quarter cent? Is it an eighth of a cent? Because I think that's much different to ask from the voter. And, can the city step in and say, okay, well, that's the local funding. We think we can get there. You don't have to go to a vote. My sources have told me that the Royals have at least explored and asked, is there a way not to have a vote in Missouri to get downtown baseball? And I'm not saying that's their preference. I'm saying that question's at least been asked in some of the meetings. And I don't know whether, and I reported last week, they met with, not the mayor, but other people from Kansas City, Missouri last Tuesday, even as this conversation in Kansas is heating up. But there's a lot of people behind the scenes that can see some momentum with the Royals and potentially moving, giving up on this vision of downtown baseball that, like Vahe mentioned, and you and I mentioned, just almost everything we write. This conversation started with them talking about downtown baseball.
That was the vision.
And I think if they don't go to downtown baseball, it'll be clear as day that they're telling us they don't think they can execute a project that includes downtown baseball.
Yeah, and I remember those kind of original John Sherman comments also included Kansas City, Missouri.
Yeah, in fact, that very first listening tour episode at the Westport Plex Pod, one of the questions was explicitly that. It was, can you guarantee that you will stay in Kansas City, Missouri? And I can't remember the exact quote, but it was along the lines of, yes, I can guarantee that. And it was Missouri.
He said yes. People didn't hear him. And Ryan Lefevre, the MC that night, asked him, say again. He said, yes, I can. I'll give him somewhat of a pass on it. Like, they tried.
Yes, he gets grace for this.
I think that's a reasonable point.
It was turned down by the voters. But I will say, and I have said this in many columns too, I don't think downtown baseball was turned down by the voters. I think a terrible plan for downtown baseball was turned down by the voters. And to me, those are two separate things. But I could see where the Royals would be nervous and about saying, can we try this again in front of voters?
And look, the broader point to me here isn't. I agree that it's fair to let his view on that evolve after this, right? But you're right. First of all, what was rejected was a bad plan, not necessarily downtown baseball, or I shouldn't say even bad, just lack of clarity in the plan, and felt hasty. All these things at the end. But the bigger reason we're bringing this up is that was what what the vision theoretically was, and what the impetus seemed like to move. Like when it was first brought up, the impetus was, let's get to downtown. That was the philosophy. I don't think
100%
any of the thought was, we're going to go where we can build something and make the most money, which is how it's coming off at this point.
I think it's clear now the Chiefs have way more options than the Royals, and the Royals are trying to find an option that makes sense here. And as Sam's talked about with the Missouri funding, they have a much greater path there. Real quick, Sam, does it impact, hypothetical for you, let's say the Royals announced in a month they're going to Kansas. Does that impact the Chiefs in any way?
Yeah, I think it does. And that I asked, you were there when I asked Mark Donovan about that at those owners' meetings that you referenced, and I think his thought was not necessarily. I think that it does. And the reason I think it does is because we've questioned why you and I have had, background conversations with people about the potential to get even one stadium backed by these star bonds proposals. And there's experts that really doubt this. And I've told you guys that I don't think the Chiefs are operating thinking that they would get 2/3 of a stadium paid for. Well, double that with 2 stadiums. And that's really hard for me to do the math on. But, I think the flip side of that is if the Royals announce one way or the other, I think that the other one sort of feels like, can we lose out on both of these? If the Royals announce they're going to Kansas, I think it becomes much more real to Jackson County. What would an empty Truman Sports Complex look like? Teams aren't going to demolish those stadiums. What happens there? That becomes, it's an everyday reminder of what's not there and like what becomes of that area. Because we all know that there's not a lot around there. So what happens there? And so I don't think that would be a bad thing for the Chiefs if Jackson County sort of has that vision become halfway to reality. Because I don't know that they feel that necessarily fully right now.
Well, it's haunting.
Yeah, no, it is haunting to think just what would almost like a Kemper type Truman Sports Complex,
Except there's no way they're keeping the facility, right? I mean, I've not ever spent a moment quite visualizing like, okay, they're both gone. What is this?
I think it would be demolished for sure, but yeah.
Well, I think it would become or a big parking lot area for city vehicles. If you ever driven, what is it, Stadium Road that runs along the west side of the Truman Sports Complex?
Raytown Road.
Raytown Road is south.
Yeah, funnels up.
Stadium is on the west side. There are tons of trucks and city vehicles parked there.
We got just the right spot for it, do we?
That's right.
It also is interesting, Sam, just to kind of put a bow on this, is that the Chiefs seem to be on the forefront of doing all these things and preparing. It'd be very interesting if the Royals announced first and sort of pigeonholed the Chiefs into something else when the Chiefs have sort of been leading the charge on this whole thing. But you're saying that's the possibility that could happen.
Yeah, I very much. And I actually think if I'm gambling on which team we hear from first, I would anticipate probably the Royals, but certainly this has gone on for so long, I don't think I wouldn't bet on anything.
You're out of the predictions business.
Specifically out of the gambling business.
It's a generational decision. Jesse, you've mentioned it a couple times. The airport, the old airport, it was built in 1972. Kemper opened in 74 in the Truman Sports Complex, I think in 72 and 73. And now we're in, 50 years or so later, where we've got a new airport, and now we're looking at new stadiums for the team. So very much a generational moment here for Kansas City. And we'll keep talking about it as long as it's an issue on SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star Sports podcast presented by Underdog. Big thanks to our producers, Monty Davis and Randy Mason, and to our editors, Jeff Rosen and Scott Chasen. We will talk to you again soon.